The unattainable princess. The Zyrian Empire was the most powerful civilization in the galaxy, ruling over 100 star systems. Its rulers were feared, its warriors unmatched, and its technology beyond imagination. But there was one mystery that no one in the galaxy could solve: Princess Valina's heart. For years, powerful alien lords, wealthy emperors, and fearless warriors had tried to win her favor. Every single one of them failed. Valina was not just the daughter of the emperor. She was the most desired woman in the galaxy. Her beauty was unmatched, tall, elegant, with shimmering violet skin and piercing silver eyes. Her voice was like music, her movements graceful as flowing water. But she was not just beautiful. She was brilliant, strong, and untouchable. No alien male had ever impressed her. A new warrior arrives. The Zyrian Palace stood at the heart of the capital city, a place of gold and glass, surrounded by towering spires and floating gardens. Today, it was filled with diplomats, nobles, and warriors from across the stars. They had all come for one purpose: to gain favor with the princess. Valina sat on her throne, watching with boredom as yet another alien noble tried to impress her. The man, a Garnak warlord, was tall and muscular, covered in thick, golden armor. His deep voice echoed through the hall as he spoke of his conquests, his wealth, and his undefeated armies. "I have conquered 6 star systems in your name, princess," he declared, kneeling before her. "No force in the galaxy can stand against me. Let me stand beside you as your mate, and together we shall rule the stars." Valina's silver eyes barely showed any interest. She had heard these words before. Without hesitation, she gave her usual answer, a simple nod to the guards. The meaning was clear. No. The warlord stiffened, his pride wounded. His face twisted in anger, but he dared not argue. No one argued with Valina. He stood and left, his boots thudding against the polished floor. Another failure. Another rejection. The nobles whispered among themselves, "Will no one ever win her heart? She is impossible to please. Perhaps she wishes to remain alone forever." But Valina ignored them. None of these men had ever challenged her, entreated her, or even made her feel something new. They all wanted her for her status, her power. Not a single one had seen her as more than a prize. Then the doors of the grand hall opened again, and he walked in. The human mercenary. The man was unlike anyone in the hall. He wasn't covered in golden armor. He wore a simple dark uniform with light combat gear. He had no glowing skin, no massive horns, no wings. He was plain, simple, human. Humans were new to the galactic stage. No one had expected much from them. They were smaller, weaker, and had no fancy biological enhancements like other species. Yet they were survivors, fighters, dangerous in ways no one could understand. This one, he didn't look nervous. He didn't kneel. He didn't bow. Instead, he looked directly at Valina. For the first time, in a long time, she felt something. The room fell silent. Every noble, every warrior, every alien lord stared at the human with disbelief. "Who is this?" One noble whispered. "A mercenary," another muttered. "Impossible. A human mercenary, standing before the princess like an equal." But Jack Carter, because that was his name, didn't care. He stepped forward with confidence, hands in his pockets, a slight smirk on his face. "Princess," he said, his voice calm, "I hear you're impossible to impress." The nobles gasped at his disrespect. A mere human, speaking so casually. Valina raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "And you think you are different?" Jack shrugged. "I don't care about impressing you. I just want to know if you are as interesting as they say." Another gasped. A warrior from the side stood up in rage. "You dare speak to the princess this way?" Jack barely glanced at him. "Yeah, I do." The warrior drew his blade. "I should cut you down where you stand." But before anyone could react, Valina lifted her hand. The warrior stopped immediately. She was smiling. It was a rare sight. A genuine smile. This human, he wasn't like the others. He wasn't here to worship her, to beg for her favor. He wasn't here to impress her with tales of battle or wealth. He was treating her like a person. And for the first time in a long time, Velina felt something stir inside her chest. The first spark. Jack met her gaze, unfazed by the nobles, the warriors, the rules of the Zarian court. "Tell me, princess," he said, "why do you reject every alien male in this galaxy? What are you waiting for?" Velina leaned forward on her throne, her silver eyes locked onto his. She didn't have an answer. Not yet. But something told her she was about to find out. The forbidden challenge. The grand halls of the Zarian palace were silent. Every noble, every warrior, every diplomat from across the galaxy stared in disbelief. A human mercenary, a mere soldier from a species considered young and insignificant, had just challenged their entire way of thinking. Jack Carter stood in the center of the throne room, hands in his pockets, a relaxed smirk on his face. He had not bowed. He had not begged for the princess's favor like every other alien noble before him. He had spoken to her like an equal. More than that, he had entreated her. Velina leaned back in her throne, her piercing silver eyes studying him. For years, she had dismissed alien suitors with a single glance. Yet here she was, actually interested. And that, more than anything, terrified the nobles. One of them, Lord Vastek, a towering Zarian general, slammed his fist on the marble floor. His crimson cape swayed as he took a step forward, his golden armor gleaming under the palace lights. "This is an insult to the Zarian Empire," he roared. "A mere human dares to stand before our princess as an equal. This is blasphemy." Jack didn't even flinch. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, as if unimpressed. "I didn't realize talking was illegal around here." A few gasps echoed through the hall. The human wasn't afraid. Velina watched him closely, her fingers lightly tapping against the armrest of her throne. She should have been offended. She should have ordered the guards to drag him out of the palace and toss him into deep space. But she didn't, because for the first time in her life, someone was treating her like a person, not a prize. The arena of trials. General Vastek turned to Velina, his face a mask of anger. "Princess, this cannot be allowed. If this human believes himself worthy to stand among us, let him prove it." A murmur rippled through the gathered aliens. The Zarian challenge. Velina's lips curled into a small, unreadable smile. She could have denied it. She could have sent Jack away, as she had done with hundreds before him. But she didn't want to. Instead, she stood from her throne. The hall fell silent. "If this human wishes to stand in my presence," she said slowly, her voice smooth as silk, "then let him stand before the warriors of Zaire and prove he is not beneath them." Jack raised an eyebrow. "And what exactly does that mean?" Vastek turned toward him, a cruel smile spreading across his sharp features. "It means, human, that you will enter the arena of trials, where you will fight against the greatest warriors of the Zarian Empire." Jack let out a low whistle. "You guys really take rejection personally, huh?" Velina let out a soft chuckle, barely noticeable, but it was there. Vastek clenched his fists. "You won't be laughing when you're lying broken in the arena, human." Jack crossed his arms. "All right. Fine. I'll play your little game. But let's make something clear." He took a step closer, his expression shifting, his usual easygoing smirk fading. "I don't fight for the right to stand beside the princess. I fight because I don't take threats lightly." His voice carried through the hall like a thunderclap. And for the first time, Vastek hesitated. Because there was something dangerous in Jack's eyes. Something that said he had been through worse. The fight begins. The arena of trials was an ancient battleground beneath the Zarian palace. It was a place of honor and blood, where only the strongest survived. Thousands of Zarians filled the stands, eager to witness the human's humiliation. In the center of the circular arena stood three of Zaire's strongest warriors. The first was Gorven, a four-armed giant with obsidian-black skin and razor-sharp tusks. The second was Tyrek the Unbroken, a reptilian brute covered in thick scales, his tail tipped with venomous spines. The third was Kelore, a female warrior clad in gleaming silver armor, her speed unmatched by any in the Empire. And then there was Jack Carter, alone, unarmed, a single human against three of the deadliest fighters in the Empire. Velina sat high in her royal balcony, watching with sharp eyes. The crowd roared for blood. Vastek stood beside her, arms crossed. He'll be dead in under a minute. Velina didn't respond, because she had a feeling Jack Carter was about to surprise them all. The battle begins. The gong rang. The three warriors charge. Jack didn't wait. He moved. With inhuman speed, he rolled beneath Gorven's massive fist, grabbed a handful of sand, and threw it directly into Kellore's eyes. The female warrior let out a cry of rage, momentarily blinded. The crowd gasped. Vastek scowled. He fights dishonorably. Velina smirked. He fights to win. Jack ducked Tyrek's tail whip and grabbed hold of it instead. Using the alien's own momentum, he swung upward, delivering a brutal kick to the side of Gorven's head. The massive warrior staggered. Tyrek roared and tried to shake Jack off, but the human climbed onto his back, wrapping his arm around the alien's throat. The impossible happened. Tyrek fell. The arena went dead silent. Velina's silver eyes gleamed. Interesting. But the fight wasn't over yet. Kelore recovered from the sand attack and lunged at Jack with her twin blades. Jack barely managed to dodge, twisting to the side as she came in with another strike. She was faster, stronger, but Jack was unpredictable. He let her get close, too close. And then, at the last moment, he stepped aside and used her own momentum to slam her into the ground. A brutal final punch to the side of her head ended it. She collapsed. Silence. Then, thunderous cheers. Velina leaned forward, her heart pounding in her chest. This human had just beaten three of her strongest warriors, and as he stood there, bruised and breathing heavily, he looked up at her and smirked. Not bad, right, princess? For the first time in her life, Velina was speechless. The Zairian challenge, the arena of trials, was never silent. It had seen thousands of battles, heard the roars of countless warriors, and witnessed the bloodshed of champions and challengers alike. But tonight, the arena was dead silent. Every noble, every warrior, every spectator in the stands sat frozen in disbelief. The impossible had just happened. A human, a mere mercenary from an unknown backwater planet, had defeated three of the strongest Zairian warriors in combat. And he hadn't just won. He had dominated them. Jack Carter stood in the center of the battlefield, bruised and breathing heavily. Dust and sweat clung to his skin, his combat vest torn at the shoulder, but his eyes burned with the same reckless confidence they always had. He had done what no alien male had managed before. He had earned the princess's attention. The shock of the nobles. From her royal balcony high above the arena, Princess Velina leaned forward in her seat, her silver eyes locked onto Jack. She had expected him to die. She had expected him to fight bravely, perhaps even put up a good show before falling like every other fool who had thought themselves worthy. But now she was intrigued. Beside her, General Vastek was fuming. The Zairian noble slammed his fist against the railing, his crimson cape billowing behind him. This is impossible. He cheated. The human fights like a dishonorable coward. Velina smirked slightly, still watching Jack. No, he fights like someone who refuses to lose. Vastek growled, his golden armor rattling as he turned toward her. Princess, you cannot allow this insult to stand. He has made a mockery of our warriors. The gathered nobles murmured in agreement. The human had to be put in his place. Velina exhaled slowly, tapping her fingers against the gilded armrest of her throne. She should have dismissed the human immediately. She should have declared the challenge invalid, unworthy, beneath her attention. But she didn't. Because for the first time in her life, she wanted to see what happened next. The aftermath. Jack wiped a streak of blood from his lip as the arena doors finally creaked open. Zarian guards marched forward, their golden armor gleaming in the floodlights. For a moment, Jack thought they were coming to arrest him. Wouldn't be the first time. Instead, one of the armored warriors stepped forward and saluted him. A short, sharp movement of respect. Jack blinked. Didn't see that coming. The warrior stepped aside, motioning for him to follow. The princess has requested your presence in the royal halls. Jack raised an eyebrow. She has she? The crowd whispered in shock. The human wasn't being removed, he was being summoned. Jack gave a small smirk as he rolled his shoulders, stepping toward the exit. Guess I'm not doing too bad for a guy who just got here. The royal summoning. The grand hall of the Zarian palace was a masterpiece of alien architecture. Massive crystalline pillars stretched toward the ceiling, reflecting light in shimmering patterns. The floor was smooth obsidian, polished to perfection. The air smelled of exotic flowers, carried in from the palace gardens. Jack had been in a lot of fancy places before, but this was next level. He strolled forward, unbothered by the hundreds of eyes watching him. The entire noble court had gathered to see what the princess would do. At the far end of the hall, Princess Velina sat upon her throne. She was still watching him. Not like the others, not with contempt, not with disgust, not with jealousy. She was watching him with something else entirely. Curiosity. Jack stopped at the base of the grand staircase leading up to the throne, crossing his arms lazily. So, what now? Do I get a prize, or do your guards throw me out an airlock? Gasps rippled through the court. How dare he speak so casually to the princess? But Velina merely tilted her head, amused. You do not seem concerned for your own fate, human. Jack shrugged. You wouldn't have dragged me all the way up here just to kill me. That'd be a waste of effort. Another round of shocked whispers. He wasn't afraid of her. Velina's lips curled slightly. No, I would not waste effort on something so uninteresting. Jack raised an eyebrow. So, you think I'm interesting? Silence. Velina stared at him for a long moment before letting out a soft chuckle. You are not what I expected. That was when Vastek snapped. This is an insult. The Zarian general stepped forward, hand on his sword hilt. This human is not worthy to stand in this hall. He has defied our traditions, embarrassed our warriors, and insulted our people. I demand the right to challenge him. The nobles cheered in agreement. Jack let out a sigh, running a hand through his messy brown hair. You people really don't know how to take a loss, do you? Velina lifted a hand, silencing the court instantly. For a long moment, she didn't speak. She simply studied Jack, as if deciding something. Then she leaned forward, her silver eyes gleaming. If he is to be challenged, she said, her voice smooth and commanding, then let it be by me. The court froze. Even Vastek went pale. Jack blinked. Wait. What? Velina stood from her throne, descending the grand staircase slowly. Since no warrior in this court has managed to prove themselves worthy, she continued, stopping just a few feet away from Jack. Then I will test you myself. Jack's usual smirk faded, his expression turning serious. He wasn't expecting this. You want to fight me? He asked. Velina's silver eyes locked onto his. No, she whispered. I want to see what makes you different. And for the first time since he'd arrived on this alien world, Jack Carter had no idea what was going to happen next. The growing attraction. Jack Carter had survived death matches, wars, and bar fights on planets no one had ever heard of. But this was new. He stood in the royal training arena, a massive open courtyard lined with intricate golden carvings and banners of the Zyrian Empire. The twin suns of the capital world burned high in the sky, casting long shadows over the polished black stone floor. And standing across from him, wielding a sleek, curved blade in one hand, was Princess Velina. Jack wasn't afraid of a fight. He had survived worse. But this wasn't just any fight. This was a test, and he had no idea what he was being tested for. A challenge unlike any other. The gathered nobles, warriors, and dignitaries watched in complete silence. They had expected Jack to be thrown out of the palace, imprisoned, or executed after embarrassing their warriors. Instead, he was standing face to face with the princess herself. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. A duel? The princess herself. This is unheard of. She has never challenged any suitor before. Why now? Why him? Jack adjusted his stance, rolling his shoulders. So, am I supposed to bow, or do we just get straight to trying to kill each other? Velina's lips curved slightly. Amusement. Do you think I would waste my time fighting someone unworthy? She asked. Jack smirked. So you admit I might be worth your time. More gasps from the audience. Velina didn't react. Instead, she raised her sword slightly, tilting her head. We shall see. Then she moved. The fight begins. Velina was fast. Faster than any warrior Jack had ever faced. One moment, she was standing in front of him. The next, she was behind him. Jack barely had time to react as her blade sliced through the air, missing his throat by an inch. He twisted away, rolling to the side as she came at him again. Her silver eyes locked onto him with deadly focus. Dame, Jack muttered, dodging another strike. You really don't hold back, do you? Velina didn't answer. She didn't need to. She struck again, this time, faster. Jack barely managed to sidestep, feeling the cold wind from her blade brush against his arm. The crowd watched in stunned silence. The princess had fought many warriors before, but she had never fought like this. There was a fire in her movements, an intensity that no one had ever seen. And Jack? He was grinning. You're enjoying this, Velina said suddenly, mid-strike. Jack blocked the attack with his forearm, sliding back across the polished stone floor. You're the first person I've fought in a long time who actually makes me work for it. Velina's silver eyes flickered with something unreadable. Then let's see if you can keep up. She lunged forward, and Jack didn't dodge. Instead, he stepped into her attack. Velina's blade was inches from his neck before he suddenly grabbed her wrist, twisting her sword arm behind her back. She gasped in surprise. For the first time in her life, someone had turned the fight against her. Jack leaned close, his breath warm against her ear. Caught you. For a moment, everything stopped. The crowd held its breath. The nobles stared in disbelief. And Velina. She felt something she had never felt before. Excitement. A dangerous realization. Jack released her and stepped back, shaking out his arms. Not bad, princess. But if you want to beat me, you're gonna have to try harder than that. Velina turned to face him, her expression unreadable. She was the most sought-after woman in the galaxy. Powerful warriors, kings, and emperors had fought to win her heart, and she had never given them a second glance. But this human, he didn't try to impress her. He didn't worship her like the others. He challenged her. And for the first time, she wasn't sure who was testing who. Vastek, still standing in the audience, was seething with rage. Enough of this. This human has no right to stand in the presence of our princess. Jack sighed, turning to face the furious noble. Man, you really don't know when to quit, huh? Vastek drew his own sword. I challenge you, human, but duel to the death. The crowd gasped again. Jack rolled his eyes. Oh, for crying out loud. But before he could finish, Velina raised her hand. No. Everyone froze. Vastek turned, furious. But princess. Velina's silver eyes flashed. I said no. Her voice was calm, final. For the first time in his life, Vastek looked afraid. Jack raised an eyebrow. Interesting. Velina turned to Jack. You will accompany me back to the palace. Immediately. Jack blinked. Wait. What? She didn't give him a choice. She simply walked away. And against all logic, against all rules of the Empire, Jack Carter followed her. The night that changed everything. The royal palace was quiet. The halls, once filled with nobles and guards, were now empty. Jack stood at the massive balcony overlooking the Zarian capital. The sky was filled with towering spires and glowing lights stretching far into the distance. He exhaled slowly. He wasn't sure what was happening. Are you afraid? Jack turned. Velina stood beside him, her silver eyes reflecting the city lights. He smirked. I don't get afraid. Velina studied him carefully. You do not behave like the others. You do not bow. You do not seek my favor. Why? Jack shrugged. Because I don't see you as something to be won. Velina's breath caught. No one had ever said that to her before. She stepped closer, the space between them growing smaller. You are unlike any man I have ever met. Jack chuckled. Yeah, I get that a lot. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The galaxy outside the palace continued to turn, oblivious to what was happening. Oblivious to the fact that, at this moment, something new, something impossible was beginning. Then, Velina whispered something Jack never expected to hear. You intrigue me, human. And for the first time in his life, Jack Carter didn't know what to say. The deadly betrayal. Jack Carter had been in dangerous situations before. Gunfights, bar brawls, and skirmishes on war-torn planets where survival was nothing but a gamble. But standing beside Princess Velina, alone in the dimly lit halls of the Zarian palace, he felt something unfamiliar. Uncertainty. Not because of fear. No, Jack wasn't the type to get scared. But because for the first time in his life, he didn't know what came next. The most powerful woman in the galaxy had just told him, you intrigue me, human. And now, he was walking a razor-thin line between fascination and destruction. A silent storm. The palace was eerily quiet. The usual murmurs of noble conversations, the soft hum of servants moving through the corridors, even the rhythmic march of royal guards, all were gone. Jack noticed it immediately. Something was wrong. He slowed his steps, glancing around the hall. Velina walked beside him, her silver eyes unreadable, but Jack could tell she noticed it too. You've got enemies, don't you? Jack muttered, keeping his voice low. Velina barely spared him a glance. Many. Jack smirked. And how many of them want me dead? She finally looked at him, her gaze sharp. More than you can count. Jack sighed, rubbing his neck. Figures. She stopped walking. He did too. The air was heavy, as if the entire palace was holding its breath. Velina turned toward him fully. You do not belong here, Jack Carter. My people see you as an outsider, as a threat. Jack crossed his arms. Yeah, I got that impression when they kept trying to kill me. She studied him for a long moment, then took a step closer, closer than she had ever stood before. For the first time, her voice was quiet, almost hesitant. Yet I find myself wondering, what would happen if I told you to stay? Jack blinked. That was unexpected. For the first time since he arrived, she wasn't speaking as a princess, but as a woman. And that was dangerous, because he was starting to wonder the same thing. But before either of them could say another word, a sound shattered the silence. A deep, rumbling explosion. The palace under siege. The walls trembled. The floor beneath them shook. A distant alarm screamed through the palace halls. Jack's instincts kicked in immediately. He grabbed Velina's wrist and pulled her behind cover. Just in time. The massive crystal glass windows of the hallway exploded inward, showering them in shards of glowing debris. Velina gasped, but Jack was already moving, shielding her with his body as he scanned the chaos. Through the shattered windows, he could see it. Ships. Dozens of them. Zirian warships, painted in the deep crimson of the royal fleet, hovering just outside the palace walls. Jack's gut twisted. This wasn't some random attack. This was an inside job. A coup. The betrayal revealed. A figure stepped through the smoke and shattered glass. Jack wasn't surprised when he saw General Vastek standing there, his golden armor gleaming under the burning sky. The general's face was twisted with satisfaction. "I warned you, Princess," Vastek sneered. "I warned you that this human was a danger to our empire." Velina straightened, shaking off the dust from her royal attire. "This has nothing to do with him," she said coldly. "This is about your jealousy." Vastek chuckled, stepping forward as his personal guard poured into the palace halls, weapons raised. "My loyalty has always been to Zaire," he said. "And you, Princess, are making unwise choices, choices that will weaken our empire." He glanced at Jack with pure hatred, starting with him. Jack sighed, cracking his neck. "Great, let me guess, I get executed now." Vastek grinned. "Executed? No, human. That would be too easy." He turned back to Velina. "You will announce to the empire that this human means nothing to you. You will declare his existence an insult, a mistake, and you will cast him aside, or you will die with him." Silence. Jack felt Velina's eyes on him. For the first time, she was hesitating. Not out of fear, but out of something else. Then, slowly, she stepped forward, and what she said next changed everything. The choice that shook an empire. "You are a fool, Vastek," Velina said, her voice calm, steady. The general narrowed his eyes. "What?" Velina lifted her chin, stepping between Vastek and Jack. "I will not betray him." The court gasped. The gathered guards froze. Jack himself stared at her. Vastek's expression twisted into rage. "You would risk everything for a mere human." Velina's silver eyes burned. "This human has proven himself more honorable than any Zarian noble in this room." She turned to Jack. "And if you want him dead, General, you will have to go through me." Vastek snapped. "Then so be it." He raised his sword. And Jack moved. In the blink of an eye, Jack grabbed a fallen weapon from the ground and fired. A single shot. Straight into Vastek's shoulder. The general staggered back, roaring in pain, his sword clattering to the floor. His guards hesitated, unsure of whether to attack. And that hesitation was all Jack needed. He grabbed Velina's hand and ran. The great escape. They tore through the palace corridors, alarms blaring behind them. Jack could hear the shouts of Vastek's guards, the pounding of boots against the marble floor. "This way." Velina pulled him toward a hidden passage, her breath ragged but determined. Jack grinned. "So, does this mean you like me or?" "Shut up and run." They burst into an underground hangar, where a sleek black Zirian transport ship was waiting. Jack whistled. "You have an escape ship, planning on running away from royal life, Princess." Velina smirked, shoving him toward the cockpit. "Just get us out of here, human." Jack slid into the pilot's seat, flicking the switches as the ship roared to life. "Hope you're ready, Your Highness." Velina buckled into the co-pilot's chair. "For what?" Jack grinned as the ship lifted off, thrusters glowing. "For the best damn getaway of your life. The impossible rescue." The Zirian Empire was built on order, control, and absolute obedience. And at this moment, Jack Carter and Princess Velina had shattered all three. Their stolen Zirian transport ship roared through the atmosphere, the deep red of the Zirian capital world shrinking behind them. Explosions rippled across the surface as the palace forces scrambled to recover from the coup attempt. Jack gripped the flight controls, his smirk unwavering despite the three warships locking onto them from above. "Let me guess, Jack muttered as the warning sirens blared. "Those are your dad's ships, right?" Velina, strapped into the co-pilot's chair, didn't bother looking up. "No, my father's warships would have already vaporized us." Jack clicked his tongue. "Great. So who are these guys?" Velina's silver eyes flicked to the glowing red symbols on the display screen. She recognized the insignia instantly. Vastec's private fleet. Jack grinned. "Good. I was hoping for a fair fight." Velina gave him an unreadable look. 3 heavily armed warships against a lightly armored diplomatic transport. Jack flipped a switch, the thrusters igniting in a burst of speed. "Yeah, sounds fair to me." The hunt begins. The warships closed in, their massive cannons glowing with deadly energy. Jack pulled the ship into a steep dive, dodging between floating space stations and abandoned cargo freighters. Laser fire rained down behind them, scorching the hull. "You do realize," Velina said over the alarms, "this ship has no weapons." Jack dodged another blast, spinning the ship at an impossible angle to squeeze through the wreckage of a derelict vessel. "Then I guess we'll just have to outfly them." Velina's grip tightened on the seat's armrest. "I sincerely doubt you can." Jack suddenly cut the engines, letting the ship drift in zero gravity for half a second, just long enough for the lead warship to overshoot their position. Then, with a roar of thrusters, he gunned the engines back to full power, flipping the ship and blasting in the opposite direction. The warships overshot their target, their cannons firing into empty space. Velina's breath caught. "That was..." Jack smirked. "Cool? Yeah, I know." She exhaled sharply. "Impressive." Jack blinked. That was probably the closest thing to a compliment he was ever getting from her. But their moment was short-lived. Because suddenly, the ship lurched violently. The warships had recovered, and one of them had locked onto them with an energy tether. Jack cursed. "All right, new plan. Any ideas?" Velina's eyes narrowed. "Yes, but you won't like it." Jack grinned. "I haven't liked anything since I got here." "Lay it on me." A desperate gamble. Velina unstrapped herself and moved to the back of the cockpit, pressing a hidden panel on the wall. The metal hissed and slid open, revealing a Zyrian escape pod. Jack groaned. "Oh, come on. You want to split up? That's the worst plan." Velina turned back to him, her expression unreadable. "They're after me, not you. If I leave, you'll have a chance to escape." Jack's smirk vanished. "Not happening." Velina frowned. "Jack, I don't leave people behind, princess." His voice was serious now. "Especially not when they're risking their neck for me." Velina hesitated. For a second, she wasn't the untouchable princess anymore. But the moment passed quickly. She straightened, her expression hardening. "Then do exactly as I say." Jack sighed. "You just love being in charge, don't you? Move." Jack hit the controls again, spinning the ship toward the nearest asteroid belt. "What's the plan?" Velina was already typing commands into the ship's console. "We overload the ship's power core and use it as a decoy." Jack blinked. "That is an insane plan." Velina arched an eyebrow. "So you like it?" Jack grinned. "Oh, I love it." The final move. The asteroid belt loomed ahead, massive rocks tumbling through space at terrifying speeds. Jack maneuvered the ship through the debris, dodging and weaving between deadly spinning asteroids as enemy fire rained down behind them. "Initiating overload sequence," Velina announced. Jack's fingers flew over the controls. "If this works, I'm officially letting you plan our future suicide missions." Velina didn't respond, but Jack could have sworn he saw a flicker of amusement in her eyes. The ship's core hummed dangerously. The engines flared bright blue. Then, boom, Jack and Velina launched out of the transport in the escape pod, just as the ship exploded in a blinding fireball. The explosion was so massive that it knocked the warships off course, their shields struggling to withstand the shockwave. Jack and Velina's escape pod hurtled into the asteroid belt, hidden among the debris. For a few seconds, there was nothing but silence. Then, static crackled in the cockpit. A voice filled with rage. "Vastek, find them." The general barked through the comms. They cannot have gone far. Jack exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "All right. So, what now?" Velina gazed out the viewport, watching as the warships desperately scanned the debris for any sign of them. Then, slowly, she turned back to him. "We go where even my people will not follow," she said quietly. Jack frowned. "And where's that?" Her silver eyes darkened. "The edge of the void." Jack blinked. "You mean that creepy, uncharted region of space that people keep disappearing in?" "Yes." He groaned. "Oh, fantastic. Sure. Let's go straight into cosmic hell." Velina strapped herself in. "Unless you'd rather go back and surrender." Jack laughed. "Princess, I'd rather get eaten by space monsters than give Vastek the satisfaction." Velina smirked. "Then we agree on something." Jack rolled his eyes. Yeah, but let's get one thing straight." She tilted her head. "What?" Jack grinned. "Next time, I get to be the one making the reckless plans." And with that, he punched the thrusters, and they disappeared into the darkness beyond the stars. The heart's choice. The edge of the void was a place where maps ended, where even the bravest explorers refused to go. For centuries, rumors whispered of ships that drifted too close, of vessels swallowed by the endless dark, their distress calls fading into static. No one who entered ever returned. And now, Jack Carter and Princess Velina were heading straight for it. Their stolen escape pod rattled violently, its navigation systems struggling against the gravitational anomalies that churned in the abyss. The stars outside flickered unnaturally, as if something beyond space itself was watching. Jack gritted his teeth, gripping the controls. "Remind me again why we're flying into cosmic death instead of literally anywhere else." Velina, seated beside him, didn't look away from the viewport. Her silver eyes were sharp, calculating. "Because Vastek will never follow us here." Jack snorted. "Yeah, because even your empire is smart enough to stay the hell away." A loud proximity alarm blared, red lights flashing in the cockpit. Jack checked the readings. His stomach sank. Something was out there. Something big. The Ghost Fleet. From the blackness, a shape emerged. At first, Jack thought it was an asteroid. Then the silhouette became clearer. A warship. No, an entire fleet of warships. But these were no ordinary vessels. Their hulls were scared, ancient, covered in the marks of forgotten battles. Cracks ran along their surfaces, yet they drifted in perfect silence, like sentinels frozen in time. Jack exhaled. "Well, that's not ominous at all." Velina's gaze darkened. "This is impossible." Jack glanced at her. "I'm getting real tired of people saying that while we're actively dying." Velina ignored him, staring at the ships with something close to awe. "These are Zyrian vessels, but they vanished over 1,000 cycles ago." Jack's grip on the controls tightened. "So we just found a legendary lost fleet." "Great. That means either treasure or death, and I have a bad feeling about which one we're getting." Before Velina could respond, a transmission crackled through the cockpit. A voice, distorted, metallic, ancient. "Identify Voorus ELVs." Jack and Velina exchanged a look. Jack sighed. "All right. Let's say hi." He pressed the comms button. "Hey there, spooky ghost fleet. This is Captain Jack Carter and Princess Velina. We're just passing through and..." A sudden energy surge erupted from the nearest warship, locking onto their pod with an invisible force. Velina's fingers dug into the armrests. "Jack." The ship lurched violently, dragged toward the fleet. The swirling blackness of the void wrapped around them, swallowing all light. And in that moment, Jack realized something. They weren't being attacked. They were being claimed. The awakening of the lost. The escape pod shuddered as it was pulled into the hangar of the largest warship. Jack barely had time to check his weapons before the ship's airlock hissed open. Velina stood beside him, her stance regal despite their situation. "Stay close," Jack scoffed. "Wasn't planning on getting lost on a haunted battleship, Princess." The moment they stepped out, the doors behind them sealed shut. The interior of the ship was massive, eerily intact despite its ancient appearance. Strange glowing runes lined the walls, pulsing like a heartbeat. Jack muttered, "Yeah, this is totally normal." A figure emerged from the shadows. It was tall, armored in black and gold, its helmet sleek and angular. Its movements were too smooth, too controlled, almost inhuman. Then it spoke. "You are not the first to seek refuge here." Velina took a step forward, her voice unwavering. "Who are you?" The figure tilted its head. "We are the Forgotten. The ones who defied the Empire's rule and were cast into the void." Jack raised an eyebrow. "So, let me guess. You guys don't like the Zyrian Empire." A low mechanical chuckle. "We have no love for tyrants. But neither do we trust easily." The air grew tense. Jack glanced at Velina. "This gonna be a problem." Velina's silver eyes narrowed. "Not if they still remember their loyalty to the throne." The figure stepped closer. "And why should we? The throne abandoned us." Velina hesitated. For the first time, Jack saw uncertainty flash across her face. Jack sighed. "All right, time out. Let's cut through the royal drama and focus on the bigger problem." He crossed his arms. "You hate the Empire. We just pissed off the Empire. So what if we work together?" The armored figure studied him. Then it turned to Velina. "You would stand with us, a princess of the very empire that betrayed us." Velina lifted her chin. "I stand for what is right. If my father would abandon you, then he is no ruler of mine." Silence. Then the armored figure slowly removed its helmet. A woman's face was revealed, scared but regal, with piercing golden eyes that matched Velina's own. Velina's breath caught. "It cannot be." Jack blinked. Do you two know each other?" The woman's gaze burned into Velina's. "You are my blood," she said quietly. "I am your aunt." The return of a lost legacy. Jack stared. "Wait, what?" Velina's eyes widened. "My father told me you were dead." The woman smiled coldly. "No, he wished I was dead." She stepped forward, placing a hand on Velina's shoulder. "And now, my niece, you have come to me. The question is, will you fight with me or against me?" Velina's heart pounded. For the first time in her life, she had to make a choice that would define her forever. Stay loyal to the throne, or betray the Empire to stand with the Forgotten. She turned to Jack. He was watching her, waiting. Jack didn't tell her what to do. He never did. But she saw it in his eyes. He would stand with her, no matter what she chose. Velina took a deep breath. And then she made her choice. The beginning of a rebellion. Velina turned to the Forgotten warriors. "We will not run." Her voice rang through the hall. "We will not hide." She lifted her chin. "If the Empire wishes to hunt us, let them try." A slow grin spread across Jack's face. "So we're doing this." Velina glanced at him. "Yes." Jack cracked his knuckles. "All right then." He turned to the warriors. "Looks like we're starting a rebellion." And somewhere, light years away, the Zyrian Empire had no idea that its greatest threat had just begun.